joining us to talk about that is somebody who has specialised, obviously, in trades training, but is also head of the organisation of trade trainers in this country at a schools level. And he's questioning the emphasis that schools place upon the pathway to university and their emphasis on academia in general. Craig Dyason. And he joins us now. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
You would have heard my introduction because, and the interesting thing about you, of course, is that you are actually a school teacher, right?
I am trained as a teacher. I'm teaching classes at the moment, and have taught a number of different subjects over the years.
But you are also head of trades training in this country associated with schools. Is it OCTA? Is that the name of it?
So I am the president of CATE, which is the
Kate, sorry,
Careers
Kate.
and
Yeah, that's right.
Transition Education Association of New Zealand. And so I'm the head of essentially the careers advisors across the country. But we also work very closely with our partners, not just in trades, but also in that tertiary sector as well.
And I'm interested in an article that you wrote recently or quoted in recently, which is why I'm talking to you now, that you were saying that you're thinking that schools are too mono-focused in terms of how they're preparing the young children for a life after school. Can you develop on that for me, please?
Sure. Um, in terms of the way our education system is set up currently, as you alluded to in your introduction, we've always had this idea that higher education is important, and for many students it is. Even at my own school, the preferred choice is through tertiary. Uh, what that particular article was alluding to is kind of the dissolving of the trade space in schools and the value placed on that trade training, um, particularly for schools where there's not a lot of resource put into trade-based training.
Mm.
Uh, Students potentially are missing out on looking at different career opportunities that might have been available to them. So, not so much that it's a you've got to go one way or the other. It's that there does seem to be a lot of investment happening at one particular end, and a real value placed in kind of more academic based pathways, as opposed to vocational pathways, in which a lot of our young people are finding real success in, but the opportunities for that trade based training are becoming a little bit more limited in schools, just through resourcing and opportunities that are available to them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you should say that because one of the things that's become, I live in a sort of a tradie town actually, and one of the things that's apparent to me is that a large number of kids are leaving school at the end of NCA level one and NCA level two and actually going into well-paid, good jobs with a vocational setting, obviously, and with a pathway to, well, you'd have to say, a pretty comfortable life and style. But they aren't necessarily academics. And yet, when they are leaving school at the end of NCA level one, NCA level two, they are being counselled by careers people saying you should stay at school longer as to get presumably greater qualifications, maybe NCA level three. Is there a bias in our current school systems towards academic learning, do you think?
I'm not. I'm not convinced that that's more of a careers kind of aspect. Like the careers advisors in schools, I know that we work on a model where it's what is best for the individual student.
Well, you should,
Um,
yes. Mm,
Absolutely, like that's why we're in education. It should be
yeah.
about the individual student, what's best for them. Um, I know there's a real pressure in certain parts of the country where the opportunities for further employment and training are more limited. The disillusion of Te Pukenga and all of the training providers that are in a number of those different places are now limiting opportunities for young people to find um, kind of meaningful pathways. I do think, in some ways, NCA Level 3 in particular is slanted towards a more academic pathway. It
It
does
certainly
seem
is.
to be
Mm,
less flexible
mm,
in terms of its approach. Um, and many schools would refer to level 3 as being university entrance.
yeah.
And even within that statement, there's an automatic bias towards you do level 3, the idea is you go to university. When in fact, level 3 is a standalone qualification by itself and should be seen as such. And so I think there are certainly some schools who would look at that as a purely academic track, um, and not so much looking at those students who want to complete level 3 as a standalone qualification.
Listen,
We know
I
that
mean,
NCA level
you know,
2,
but Craig, you
oh,
know,
sorry,
the problem we've had in this country is that we've got a large number of people who are going into our universities at the moment. And I gave you some idea of the fee structure for a first year university student today. You're probably aware of it yourself. And then we've under invested, it would seem, in trades training, and now we are importing large numbers of people from overseas to do trade jobs in this country that apparently we haven't trained New Zealanders for. Who do we hold responsible for that? Central government planning, schools careers advisors, the private sector itself? What?
that's a really good question. And who should be held responsible, and who should be responsible for bringing that up? I know we face currently in schools real issues. There was an award for which was called the Prime Minister's Vocational Education Award, which was brought in by the previous Labor government. It was $2,000 to your top vocational education student to be awarded alongside the academic ducks of the school. For some reason, that award was removed last year with no consultation, no discussion around the impact on vocational education in schools and also the impact on the young people receiving it. So, once again, this idea that vocational education is somewhat lesser than an academic pathway is being reinforced by some of these policies which are coming through.
Can I
Um,
ask, well, on
there's
that particular
really,
decision? I
yeah,
mean, I actually attended a school prize giving obviously my daughter's last year. There is a massive emphasis in a state, and she goes to a state school, all right? She goes to a state school, Craig, and it's a co-educational state school. And the prize giving is very much centered around the ducks and the academics, um, very little around vocational. But who made the decision to remove? Was it this government, or was it ministry officials who decided to remove the vocational recognition prize givings?
my understanding it was part of the cost cutting that occurred through
So it
government
would be ministry
agencies.
officials cost cutting in their departments and deciding that that could go.
That was one of the things that could go. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So that the government gives a direction, or the minister gives a direction, and then they go and cut this as theirs, which sort of betrays, doesn't it, to me again? That's why the reason I'm asking the question, Craig, is because it sort of betrays to me that the Ministry of Education have that academic focus, don't they? They're a bunch of old school teachers. All of them went to university. I would suggest they have very little sympathy for vocational training in general.
I think that the current policies, the real emphasis on and understandably, there's a real emphasis on attainment, on literacy, on numeracy. Yes, we need our young people to be um, literate. We need them to be numerate. But I'm of a mind that actually young people should be exposed to some kind of vocational training or volunteering type work as part of their schooling. They're going to be a part of our communities. They're part of, they're going to be leading our country. Surely some experience in those industries and areas would be hugely beneficial for them as part
Well,
of
I
their
mean, my
education, not
generation,
as an
Craig, how old are
aside.
you, mate? Are you in your 40s or your 50s?
I am entering my 50th this year.
Okay. Well, I'm about well, I suppose I'm sort of a half a generation, maybe three quarters of a generation older than you. It was common in my generation that people went and got a holiday job, even if they were working in an academic background, and that was something that, well, and that kids left at school at 15 and started to look after themselves and were a bit more independent and resilient, I have to say, than children who leave school at 15 or 16 now. Is that a societal problem, or do you think that is because people aren't being sent down the path that you need to go and look after yourself and you need to acquire some skills independent of how well you're doing at your school studies?
Yeah, I think there is definitely elements of that. Like there's a real shift around like young people trying to find work at the moment. Like they want to find a part-time job, or they want to leave school and move into employment, and the jobs just aren't there. Of the 16 regions that we have across New Zealand, those geographic regions, 9 of them reported back last week that they're all facing real employment shortages for their young people. The young people can't find work. Those exiting school with qualifications can't find work. And a lot of it comes from, um, dare I say, a hangover from pandemic times. We've got overskilled people who are taking underskilled jobs at the moment because that's the work that they can get. And so young people tend to be the ones that are missing out. In response to the school side of things, like I'm super fortunate to work at a school that really embraces young people exploring their community. So they have a day in their curriculum which is structured to do project management based learning. And so they're doing amazing things in the community. And we've built that into our curriculum because we've seen the value of that. Unfortunately, not all schools see the value in that. And so it's very much a very strict academic based curriculum,
Mm,
of which some young people, and when we're looking at the NEETs and we're looking at those who are not in employment and training, where our schooling system hasn't quite met their needs, if there had been something in a school system that allows them to experience that vocational side of things, perhaps it would have given them a little bit more direction and um, and help them to find the pathway that we hope that eventually they will find. It does tend to be that once students leave that schooling system, the support and the um, particularly around careers and careers advice tends to be you've got to go and find it yourself, or here's a website, go and have a look at it, and hopefully you find something that you want to get engaged with. So yeah, I think there's a real space for it within our schooling system. I just don't think it's very well resourced. At the moment, there are pockets that are doing it really, really well. Um, and there are schools that are doing elements of this vocational work really, really well. But there's not enough of them to really push that this should be something that every student in New Zealand does.